Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today is a very exciting day here at Verified First because we are joined by Teri Hassell, Region VP of HR at Sysco, to discuss Women in the Workplace, Building the Business Case. This past year, we have spent our time having important conversations with some of America's most notable leaders in the HR and TA space. Through our HR at the Table thought leadership webinars, we've discussed the role HR and TA have in DE&I, brand, technology, talent, culture, leadership, and so much more. Our goal is to bring relevant and timely topics to our HR and TA community that supports you in your roles. All of these topics can be accessed through our HR at the Table resources page on our website at verifiedfirst.com. With each webinar you watch, you can earn 1 SHRM and/or 1 HRCI credit. You also have the option to receive credit for attending today's webinar too. If these discussions are important to you, be sure to check out our HR at the Table calendar to keep up to date on topics we're talking about. We've also worked hard to bring you a comprehensive deep dive of all the topics we've discussed through this series. So, if you'd like to gather more insight, be sure to check out our blog page, also at verifiedfirst.com. Now, before we dive into today's discussion, I'd like to discuss some housekeeping items. As I mentioned, this webinar is available for 1 SHRM and 1 HRCI credit. For our live attendees looking to receive credit, be sure to stick around for our post-webinar survey. If you're listening to this on demand, check your email for instructions on how to redeem your credit. Don't worry, this webinar is being recorded, so you can use it as a resource, pass it along to your coworkers, or watch it whenever you'd like. We'd love for you to utilize the chat function during this event to send in any questions that you have for our speakers. To prepare, let's practice now. In the chat feature, let us know where you're tuning in from and what the weather is like in your neck of the woods. Verified First is located in Boise, Idaho, and today it's a mostly sunny 63. With that in mind, I'd like to start by thanking Jazz HR and Namely for sponsoring this episode of HR at the Table and by officially welcoming everyone to today's discussion. Please send a friendly hello and a warm welcome in the chat to our HR at the Table host, Brianna Rosenkrantz, and Teri Hassell, Region VP of HR at Sysco. Without further ado, take it away, Brianna.
All right. Well, hello and welcome everyone to another episode of HR at the Table. Today, my team and I are completely elated because we had 1,400 registrants for this event and they are continuing to roll in. So clearly, this is a topic that resonates with you all. And I am completely honored to be given the platform to discuss the business case for women in the workplace. Now, today we're going to explore the social constructs of women in the workplace and how companies benefit when investing in them. Now, this is not a new conversation. We have been having this conversation for decades, and it is very clear that our female workforce is crucial. They are crucial when it comes to a business's success and sustainability. Yet, some organizations still fail to create an environment that empowers and leverages their women. Whether it's an unconscious bias or a glass ceiling, women are still faced with challenges when it comes to gender discrimination, pay disparity, leadership status, recognition, and inclusion. So with that, today with us, we have the lovely Teri Hassell, Region VP of HR at Sysco. And together, we're going to discuss how organizations can increase performance and business sustainability by empowering their female workforce. With that, welcome, Teri. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Brianna. How are you?
I am doing good. I'm excited. As Amanda said, our headquarters here in Boise is a nice sunny 63. That's where I'm located. So I'm ready to whip out that summer outfits here. But with that, Teri, I'd love for you to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, I'm coming to you right outside of Atlanta, Georgia. It is mid 80s here today, so it's quite sunny here as well. I have enjoyed a career in HR for about 25 years. and most of that time was in telecommunications. Since then, I have been with Sysco since 2014 and really enjoy working for the company. I am extremely passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and team building, and really everything about human resources I'm passionate about. So I feel very lucky to be here today. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Well, we feel lucky to have you here today. So thank you, Teri, for coming to share your wisdom and knowledge about this specific topic we're talking about. So with that, I also want to introduce myself. My name is Brianna Rosencrans. I am the Partner Marketing Manager Team Lead here at Verified First, and also the 2022 season host of HR at the Table. So if you've seen me before, that means you're following along with this journey, and I'm so excited for that. If you haven't seen me before, I'm excited to hopefully see your name again in future attendance. Now, with that, Teri, let's go ahead and get into today's topic. The first thing that I want to do is I kind of want to build the scene for the challenges that women are facing in the workplace. So Teri, can you let us know what those challenges are, whether they're past, present, or future?
Oh, I think that they're all over the board. Yes, past, present, and future. I think one of the challenges that women face is just a perception. There's a perception that's been going on for years as far as women not strong enough to deal with the workforce, not being able to make the tough decisions, not being able to leave the kids behind because they're their primary caregivers. I think that a lot of times women have been restricted to more of the traditional roles of caregivers, organizing, when they have entered the workforce, such as clerical positions, administrative. So I definitely think that there have been a lot of challenges for women to get into the workforce and prove themselves.
Yeah, Teri, one thing that you said, women getting into the workforce to improve themselves goes into the conversation of developing our women in the workforce. So with that, what are some of the challenges that women leaders specifically face?
I think, again, you'll probably hear me say this a lot, but probably the perception of being less, not less as a person, but maybe less as a business partner, that maybe they don't have the business acumen that men have traditionally had, that they don't understand the hard work that goes into it, the sacrifice and determination that maybe the men have been rewarded for years. There's still a stigma, I think, as far as women being the stay-at-home mom. And there's a lot of women these days who are choosing career over family, and that's okay. That's okay. You know, everybody has that choice, but I really think that there's this perception, and it's hard for women to learn how to balance their desire to have whatever they want in their home life and balance their skills and abilities with the perceptions that are out there for them to overcome.
Yeah, Teri, it's really interesting. One thing about women in leadership is they experience something called the double bind. And with this, it's talking about how, some women who are more assertive or more confident or kind of more dominant or maybe more ambitious, they're seen negatively in some lights of leadership because of the perception of how they're being received. But on the other hand, women who maybe are too passive or maybe more shy or reserved, they're more likable, but they're not seen as competent. And so it's really kind of this interesting juxtaposition of what exactly, these individuals want from women in leadership, and how one thing that we do know is that a lot of men hold these leadership positions, and those are technically the role models for these individuals for what leadership looks like. So when they mimic the same traits, they're seen as, maybe too assertive or aggressive. Whereas if they don't exhibit the same traits and they do exhibit more kind of female-oriented traits, then they're seen as more passive. So something interesting about some of those challenges that women in leadership positions face.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would completely agree with that.
Now, with that, Teri, what do you think are some of the most significant barriers when it comes to female leadership?
Some of the significant barriers. I think some of them are, like you said, being able to know how to present themselves. There's a huge balance, like we know, like what you just referenced, there's a huge balance as far as being tough, yet still soft, and understanding which aspects of our personality to demonstrate at what times. I, for myself, just as an example, I've been told at work that I'm an alpha personality. In my personal life, if you were to know me in my personal life, I don't believe I'm an alpha personality at all. I think I'm stubborn, and my husband would be thrilled if he heard me say that, but I don't think that I'm an alpha personality at all. And it's tough because women have to understand and learn what the requirements are of the job to become a good business partner in whatever role that they choose. But they have to balance that and kind of control what emotions and what aggressiveness they demonstrate at what time. And I think that with men as they're growing, I think our society and our families just traditionally teach them how to do that a little bit better than what women have traditionally been taught. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Teri, when I'm kind of thinking of one of the biggest barriers to entry here, I think about the similarity bias that exists in how if 60% of our leaders are men, then when it comes to, integrating those females into leadership positions, they are looking for unconsciously the, traits that make them similar to each other. And so that's one thing that I see in terms of, women just having kind of the difference of mapping a man for the similarity bias. And then you add the component as well for, women of color and how that is also, there's that similarity bias as well. So even if you do get women in those leadership positions, also recognizing and kind of disengineering some of that unconscious bias that you might be experiencing with that similarity bias.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Teri, I'm curious, why do you think there aren't more female leaders?
I would say tradition. I would say family traditions. I would say the stereotypes, trying to break down those walls, prove themselves in a way that doesn't make them look so aggressive, but also still learning how to balance. Like I said before, there's that tradition of families. Typically, the men have more leadership roles and the women are more passive. Traditionally, I'm not saying that's for everybody, but traditionally there's been that stereotype of the girls learning how to sew and cook and cater, and the men are the stronger, more dominant decision makers. They're the ones that make the plans and the final say. I think that with that, it gives the men a confidence, and so unintentionally, I think our traditions have almost withheld women, held them back from being more aggressive and more vocal on the decisions and the ideas that they have. We're definitely starting to get into changing that in our employment area with the DEIB efforts and the trainings and the women who are moving forward and being so successful in roles. Like CEOs and vice presidents. It's great to see, but I really think that our traditions have set women up for that.
Yeah, we've definitely made some movement with getting more women in leadership positions. There's still a lot of work to do, but it's interesting because when it comes to, higher education, women are actually kind of dominating that space, with higher grades and, taking on more courses and pursuing extracurricular activities. And with that, they've actually identified that women meet most of the standards and skills for leadership. But despite that, we still only see about 25 or 20% of women in those leadership jobs here in the United States. And so, the companies that have kind of reflected and responded to why there aren't more women in these leadership positions, their answer tends to be that there's just not diverse candidate pools of women. So Teri, we're going to talk a little bit more about that here later in terms of, how to source female candidates. But it's interesting that I think there's, definitely reflection that organizations are doing to understand why this is happening and how they can kind of eliminate that bias. But it's a process, and it's definitely difficult to kind of identify those when it's based on tradition, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. Now, I want to move on specifically and talk about how minority women are affected differently in the workplace.
Okay. I don't know if I'm exactly qualified to speak to how minority women feel in the workplace, but I can tell you about my conversations with minority women that I have worked with in the workplace and friends of mine who have talked to me about that. So I want to make it clear that I don't know firsthand what it's like. I don't feel qualified on that, but you know, it's a struggle as well. And it's something that is, it's frustrating. It's, you know, an emotional topic for a lot of them. Some of the women that I've dealt with, one of them has grown up in a very successful, very supportive community, and another one grew up in a community where they were put down and they had to watch out for their safety, you know, the different things that we hear about in the communities. But I would like to say that we're moving forward in strong measures to make them equal, but unfortunately, prejudice just isn't dead yet. I don't think that it is gone, and I think that there are still some not leaders, I won't say leaders, there are some bosses that still choose wrongly because of a person's gender, their color of their skin, maybe their religion, maybe their sexual preference. We still have those discriminations going on. And so, yeah, unfortunately, we're not there yet. I don't really know what else I can contribute on that one.
Yeah, Teri, I like that you kind of identified where you're at with kind of understanding that experience, but then also identified that it's important to have the conversations and connect with those individuals to talk with them about what their experience is like, how they can improve, you know, what the organization can do to improve it. And a lot of times organizations kind of shy away from this type of conversation because it's a little uncomfortable and you want to remain respectful. But I think that's important to be able to give a voice to the individuals within your organization and, you know, give the power to kind of help them help with the change as well. All right. I want to, oh, sorry, Teri, did you have something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. One of the things that we've started to do here at Sysco is have some town hall meetings, and I have really enjoyed those. It started years ago when we had George Floyd incident, and which was very tragic. And so we started having town hall meetings where we would have just a small group of associates and just find out, how are you doing? Just a very broad question. And I think that's important for employers to do. Just take the time to pause and find out how your associates are doing in small groups and just see what their concerns are. It's not right for us to assume that everybody is struggling with the same thing. And I think that by giving them a voice and an opportunity to just let their hair down in a safe environment and talk about it, I think that's some of the best things that we can do for them.
Yeah, Teri, you know, that is exactly the reason we started HR at the Table here. You know, this started back early on in the pandemic, and what we recognized was a lot of these HR and TA professionals were kind of pioneering with their organizations. A lot of, you know, leaders and individuals in the company were coming to them and asking them for advice on, you know, what are we supposed to do here? And so they've really become these leaders in organizations. And you know, the purpose of us coming together is to talk with these different companies who are experiencing problems that other companies are facing, hopefully coming together and providing some answers for them.
Yeah. Good.
All right. So with that, Teri, what are some of the benefits that we've seen since the introduction of women in the workplace?
Oh, I think there's been a huge diversity of thought, diversity of approach. I think that it opens up all sorts of different ideas and aspects as far as the possibilities for companies, just an option for decisions, just bringing into the conversation different options and different perspectives gives, it's like brainstorming, you know, the more people you have brainstorming, the better off you are going to be. Very seldom is our first decision the best one. So just having another voice to contribute and kind of snowball a strategy or a decision, I think that's it's empowering and it's exciting and leads us to a better direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Some other things, you know, when women are in the workplace in leadership and influential positions, they tend to boost the, you know, kind of sensitivity and emotional intelligence in the workplace. And so that's something that helps to kind of retain those employees. So when it comes to recruitment and retention, it's important that we consider kind of the female experience as well and female leaders in that process. But yeah, I think with that, there's definitely some great things that we've seen in terms of helping, kind of boost a company's bottom line. They tend to be, because they are a minority group, they tend to be more advocates for other women and then also for other people of color as well. And so with that, they are kind of more driven for justice. And so I think that's something that is important to consider as we move through and, identify what we need to do as organizations to improve that DE&I strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And despite the benefits of having women in the workplace, what are some of the glass ceilings that exist for them?
Oh boy. Well, just in summary, it's tough to catch up if you started out behind, right? It's if you had a late start, it's really hard to catch up there. Whether it's compensation, I think the last report that I saw indicated that women were still making about 86 cents, somewhere in there to the dollar of every man. So compensation is still a little bit behind. I think because of those perceptions and traditions, we're still dealing with some glass ceilings on the challenges and promotability of women. Will the woman want to travel away from home? Will she put in the long hours? Will she make the tough decisions? So I think it really depends on the individual, the skill sets that they demonstrate, and the company. I know that there's been a lot of advances for certain companies who are kind of starting the way and being the role models for companies as far as how to promote more women and get rid of some of that gender disparity. But you still have differences in their years of experience. There's still some discrimination that happens with that, but at least we've got to start.
Yeah. And Teri, I want to pause us here. We do have a question from the audience from Deborah. So Deborah, thank you for your question. This is perfect. This was actually the next question that I want to ask. So Deborah here is wondering, what kinds of things do you recommend to attract more women to apply for roles in male-dominated areas? So how can we, what can we do to expand our female candidate pool?
That's a really good question. And at Sysco, we struggle with that as well, trying to reach out to a different category or so we struggle with that as well. I think your advertising and the way that you encourage people is really important. So traditionally, I would say maybe recruit at some of the women-dominated publications, support groups, websites, things like that. But at the same point in time, I find that kind of almost traditionally stereotyped as well, as far as how do you reach more women in men fields? Oh, you go to the women areas. So I would actually promote the positions by using in the marketing scheme a woman representing that position. So like what Sysco does sometimes when we're looking for drivers is we'll promote a successful, we'll promote as far as in the marketing, a successful female driver in our Sysco uniform, which indicates that we support women in that field. So if we did that type of advertising showing a woman figure in that position, then you could still advertise in predominantly male areas for the females who are interested in that. Does that make sense? So, I mean, I would go for sporting events. Let's see, maybe some outdoor magazines or camping, ammunition, those types of outdoorsy magazines. I'm originally from Montana. I'm an outdoorsman by heart, so that's kind of where I default to, but I would use a female as part of the advertisement.
Yeah, Teri, it's really interesting. We actually interviewed the CEO of Surehand back in February of this year. And one thing that they do, they have this app called Rock the Trades. And part of their movement is figuring out how they can fill their talent pool and, continue to kind of start that from, the time of elementary all the way to the time it's, they're ready for a career. And one thing that they're doing is they have entire campaigns strictly dedicated to the women in that industry. So female welders or female
Right.
electricians, and kind of building that and integrating that into the vision that women can hold these roles too, and that it's not just a male field. And
Yeah.
so I think that that's exactly right, is showing, the representation of women in those positions.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Now, with that, I want to go ahead and move on here to a poll question, actually. And, as we strategize to figure out how we expand our candidate pool, there are other factors to consider here. So obviously, since many of you are here today, women in the workplace is a key component of recruitment and retention strategies. So I'm launching this quick poll question here to understand what else is on your HR and TA wish list. This is actually a year-long research study that we're doing. We just launched it this year, and we want to understand, what it is that you're prioritizing in your processes to better support you in your recruitment and retention initiatives. So curious, Teri, if you do not have an answer here, it is totally okay. But in your experience, what do you think will be on people's HR wish list?
For me, I think it would be a better indicator of an employee's competencies at the job and their stick-to-itiveness. I think we have seen a lot of people apply for jobs, but so many of them just don't even show up for the interviews. And then when you do hire them, they show up for a couple of days and then they disappear. And I don't know if that's because of the unemployment that's still available for some people, but I would definitely love, if I had a wish list or a magic wand, I would definitely want to know more about the candidates' qualifications, abilities, and dedication beforehand.
Yeah, Teri, you are singing a song that I'm sure many people in the audience here are also singing when it comes to the current talent market we're in, because it is something unlike we've ever seen before. And there are, different shifts in our priorities because of the talent market we're experiencing. So with that, I want to go ahead and actually close the poll. Let's look at the results and see what it is that people are looking to improve here. All right, Teri, can you see my screen here?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Yeah, so it looks like the highest one we have is actually improved quality of hire. So Teri, I think that goes in hand with kind of the, accuracy of hire that you were talking about. And then the second one is elevate candidate engagement. And so with that, again, Teri, you're talking about how, some of your candidates are ghosting you. They don't even show up for interviews. They only show up a couple days. And so I can see why this one is a top priority for organizations.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's not just me.
Not just you. Not just you. Now that we understand what's on your HR and TA wish list, let's go ahead and talk about how the pandemic may have affected some of those wish list items. So, Teri, I want to go ahead and talk about the impact of the pandemic on women. So we've heard of the Great Resignation, but what about the female recession or the she-cession? Teri, can you go ahead and talk about what this is?
Yeah, it's basically a mad exodus of women from the workforce. We're seeing many women, like I mentioned earlier, with a change of priorities, just leaving the workforce altogether and going to something different, whether it be, just to take care of the kids at home, or maybe ill parents or a family member of some sort, maybe just to contemplate starting their own business from home, but removing themselves from the workforce. And, we've seen that quite a bit.
Yeah, there's actually a study done by Boston's College Center for Work and Family, and they conducted a survey and found that 47% of the workforce prior to COVID was women, yet they actually sustained 55% of the job losses due to COVID. So, Teri, can you go ahead and expand on how COVID disproportionately affected women over men?
Well, I think if you think about some of the predominant industries that women are most commonly in, I think that focuses on the hospitality service industry, and that was hit so hard by COVID. You're thinking about hotels, restaurants, spas, travel and tourism. Those types of businesses were pretty much shut down during COVID, and most of them are predominantly held by women. So I can understand why there was more women affected by men in that type of impact. And me working for Sysco, I saw that firsthand as far as Sysco provides food, to those types of industries, and very devastating impact.
Yeah. Another layer to that, Teri, we're talking about tradition here. And I think one thing that the pandemic showed us that we kind of reverted back to tradition when it came to a woman's role in society as a caregiver. And so they had to leave the workforce because daycare shut down, their positions may have shut down, but also someone needed to stay home and take care of the kids, or, potential individuals who may have had concerns about safety and security during the pandemic. And they tended to leave the workforce kind of more in waves than men did, and men continued to hold those positions. And so
Yes.
I found that's definitely very revealing of kind of where we're at with moving towards women in the workplace.
Yes.
Now, with that, what can employers do to reintegrate that lost female workplace?
Oh, I think maybe reset their expectations and their perceptions of what employees really want now. That's always a challenge for employers, right? Is to find out what your employees want and provide the best benefits or the best bag of goodies for those people that you want to employ. There's countless studies of what inspires and engages employees, and COVID really had an impact on everyone in the world, right? So many people are changing their priorities that they want something different, whether it be maybe they have the desire to be more successful and climb the ladder now. Maybe they are tired of pressure and the hours that they work, or they just want to work remotely where they feel safe. There are so many differences but I've heard from so many people and read so many articles about the priorities shifting in the workforce. I think it's important for employers to find out what their employees want and what they as employers can provide. It doesn't make sense for every employee to be a remote employee. I mean, we've got businesses to take care of. Here, if we've got a warehouse selector, they can't pick the groceries in the warehouse from home. So remote work won't work for everybody. And our drivers, of course, can't drive the truck and deliver from home either. So it doesn't work from everybody, but I do think that the concept still exists for employers to continue to find out from their employees, what do you want? What works for you, and what are you willing to give us as an employee? And then make that flexibility available wherever possible. Those are some tough decisions for employers to make, and they're tough decisions for the employees to make as well. But it's a compromise, and that flexibility needs to be looked at regularly.
Yeah. Teri, while we're on the topic of flexibility, we actually have a couple comments here from some of the audience members. The first one I want to point out, more of a comment than a question, from Lindsay here. Lindsay wanted to point out that employers need to be more flexible since women are primary caregivers. So many women can't afford to work full time due to caregiving and the cost of daycare. The next one here from Sophie. Sophie would love to hear your suggestions, Teri, on how organizations can support working moms and how to retain them.
Besides the remote work, I think maybe a flexible schedule of maybe the mom can't come in at 8 o'clock because she has to drop her kids off at school or the daycare. So flexible schedules always work. Maybe it's different hours. Maybe it's some days she works from home. Those are what come to mind immediately. Can you repeat part of the question? I think I missed part of the question.
Yeah, supporting working moms and then how to retain them.
Supporting working moms. Boy, the best thing that I can come up with is that flexible schedule and possibly some remote hours. And it depends on the position. If there are ways that the work can be done outside of working hours, it reminds me of a non-traditional student, an older individual who's still working but wants to satisfy some college. It reminds me of that. And you can't do everything within 8 to 5. So depending on the position, depending on the mother's availability, I would say a flexible schedule would be the best. a way to identify when they've clocked into their computer, what kind of work they've done, when they've clocked out, the measurement of their contribution is the most important, not necessarily the hours that they do. So if they don't have to be present during the 8 to 5, anything after hours or flexibility for the mother to decide would be ideal.
Yeah, great answer, Teri. And thank you, Sophia, for that question here. Now, as we've kind of started to get a handle on the pandemic more and these women are reintegrated back into the workforce, I want to launch another poll question here to understand, what type of technology it is that your organization is looking to adopt or replace within the next 3 months to manage this recruitment and hiring process. So this is actually part of now a 2-year-long research study that we've been doing with Aptitude Research. They are a third-party researcher, and the purpose of this research is we actually include this in our talent acquisition technology buyer's guide. And this guide is something that helps individuals in the HR and TA space understand some of those trends around technology and then some of those requirements critical to making decisions. So if this is something that's interesting to you, it has been a huge resource for many people in our audience and in our ecosystem. We do have the guide coming out here in the next couple of weeks. So if you're interested in that, I encourage you to check it out. If you can't wait because you really want to consume this content and want to see what it's about, you can visit verifiedfirst.com and get our 2021 Talent Acquisition Technologies Buyer's Guide. So while everyone's answering that, I'm curious, Teri, again, if you don't have an answer for this one, is there something that your organization is looking to kind of reprioritize for your recruitment and hiring process here next 3 months or next year or so?
Not that I'm aware of.
That is wonderful. Then you would be under the no replacements here. So some of the selections we're looking at, whether it's an ATS, CRM, background screening, assessments, or some people already have a really great process in place for the recruitment and hiring and aren't looking. So that also is very helpful information that we're going to put in that talent acquisition technology buyer's guide. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and close the poll here. We know that with the help of technology, we can help support some of those wish list items, but technology cannot solve for everything. And why is that? Because human involvement is needed to step in. So with that, I want to go ahead and transition into creating an inclusive workplace. Okay. So I first want to start by understanding, Teri, here, what are some of the benefits of diversity of thought?
Oh, wow. It expands the options on everything, really. Diversity of thought, it brings together everyone's experiences, their background, their education, their upbringing, their cultures. It brings together different minds. Some are analytical, some aren't. Some are short-minded, some are long game-minded. Diversity of thought just helps propel everything forward. And if you think about it, we wouldn't have many of our inventions if we didn't have diversity of thought. I mean, successful strategies, we'd all be alike, right?
Yeah, oh, go for it, Teri.
Oh, I was just going to say, there's not much fun in that.
No, absolutely not. When I think of diversity thought, I think of conflict and how some people might be scared by that. But conflict in a business organization is actually a really good thing because it's showing that you actually have the ability to have conversations about different viewpoints and then come together on a solution for that. Because if you didn't know it's wrong, or if you didn't have another opinion, then you could potentially be executing on something that's maybe unethical or immoral, and practicing with your business in a way that's just not maybe inclusive or, like I said, ethical or moral. And so I think that that's a huge part in as well. Now, curious, Teri, how can organizations promote diversity of thought?
The thing that comes to mind initially is by promoting and demonstrating a safe space for what my husband and I call courageous conversations. That's exactly the conflict that you were just speaking of. And I think that the employers need to continue to improve on the promotion of their diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. The more consistent the message and the actions are, the more trusted and natural it will be. A lot of employees fear that when an employer comes out with some sort of a concept, it's the flavor of the month. We hear that a lot in HR. Oh, it's just the flavor of the month. It'll go away soon. The employer has a responsibility to prove that it's not a flavor of the month. And the only way to do that is consistency. You have to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it again. And you have to consistently provide that safe space to have a courageous conversation where someone can say something and you look for the intent rather than taking offense, pointing fingers, and starting a debate. It's let's look for resolution. I think that employers also need to provide, they need to identify methods to find or seek that information from their employees. It can't be just oh, we're going to have diversity of thought now and, promote. We want everybody to put their opinion in. You have to earn that from your employees, and you have to show that their ideas matter. Whether you follow them or not, it's still important for people to have the contribution, be able to say what's on their mind, hopefully in a respectful manner, but you can disagree respectfully, but still be able to give their ideas and make changes and identify that even if your opinion wasn't taken, it contributed to that snowball of ideas I was mentioning earlier where you're brainstorming. And that's just important. Like you were saying, a lot of people may not understand that they're walking down a path of mistake or discrimination or illegal activity. It takes everybody to pull that together, and employers are really responsible to provide the safe space, demonstrate it consistently, reinforce it with their employees and management, train it, and then seek that input from their associates actively.
Yeah. Yeah, Teri, I love the idea of courageous conversation. And to add to that, we actually have a comment from someone in the audience from Calvin. Calvin, thank you for this comment here. They wanted to mention that it helps prevent groupthink. And that's exactly right, is creating an opportunity for people to, have diversity of thought and overcome that, kind of standard way of thinking. And so when it comes to meetings, whether it's, providing an agenda ahead of time so people can collect their thoughts and think through, the positives and consequences, or maybe when you're in meetings, breaking people up into different groups and then coming back together as one. That way you're, eliminating kind of everyone taking maybe the central person's ideas. And so, Calvin, thank you for pointing that out.
Very good point.
All right, Teri. So my next question here is, how can organizations deal with unconscious bias?
Well, I think the first thing that employers need to do is train employees to know what it is. Train on what is unconscious bias and how to identify it in themselves. And then have that consistency of identifying it in each other. Maybe, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I think with the unconscious bias training, it's a way to reprogram yourself, if you will, kind of change your mindset. And when I went through my first unconscious bias training, I thought, well, I don't have unconscious bias. I like everybody, and they started flashing things up on the screen as far as they started with male, female, bisexual, and they went into that, and Christian and satanic, and then they started throwing things up on the screen as far as US military and Democrat, Republican, and basically brought to light anything that could be a difference within people. And I thought, oh, I identified a couple of things that I may have a tinge, response to. And I don't think that a lot of people understand that unconscious bias can apply to so many different things that we're not even aware of. So the first thing is training. It is educate people and let them know what it is, how to recognize it in yourself, and how to stop it. We need to pause and we need to think about, are my feelings and is my reaction really the right thing to do? Is it a response to what I've been thinking for so long in an unconscious bias, or how to address that. Training is what it all comes down to. You have to talk to your employees. Management needs to encourage their employees or their management to talk to all employees, not just the ones that they are favored with or connect with, like the buddies, the supervisor and the buddies that they've got on the floor. You can't do that. You have to make sure that you talk to everybody, you get to know them, and you identify. I find one of the best things is when you see somebody and you automatically have a perception in your mind, or you talk to them on the phone and there's no visual, you have a perception of what that person will look like. I find it helpful to record my assumptions and then go back and learn from it as far as unconscious bias in those situations. I think that more management members should probably do that as well.
That is big, Teri. I think that is a wonderful thing to practice. And, when it comes to unconscious bias, I think that's definitely something when it comes to training and helping to improve that inclusivity. But I want to talk a little bit more about some of those gaps in inclusivity. As a leader, how do you stay mindful of who's at the table and who's missing?
It's tough, actually. It's really tough. I think you have to pause and be very intentional about connecting with your team. Look at for body language, who's speaking up and who isn't. What's the body, are they the body language as far as are they making eye contact? Are they slouching? Are they maybe trying to speak and because someone speaks over them, they just withdraw? It's really hard to keep up on those things. It really is. But when you identify any of those responses, I think it's a good sign and a good time for you to have a one-on-one with that individual. Pull them aside in a conversation. Just ask them if they're okay. There may be something that's contributing to those responses, or it could be a feeling that they're being shut down in the group. I also think that having regular one-on-ones with your direct reports, finding out how things are going in their groups, is a great way to check on your team. Make sure that everybody is still engaged. Identify if there are any pain points or challenges, maybe some roadblocks that they're dealing with, and see if you can help them through it. Sometimes we're embarrassed to ask the simple questions, and with that we kind of shut ourselves down. So as leaders, I think it's a great responsibility to check on your team, make sure they're okay, and see if there's anything that you can do to help them, because that's really what we're here for, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, when it comes to company culture, that's really where inclusivity comes into play here. And sometimes the company culture is crafted by the leaders at the top. And so, what can be done if an issue isn't even recognized or there's bias that is from the top, like the CEO, for example?
Well, you ask some very good questions, some very tough ones. As an HR leader, you have a responsibility to step up and be a voice of influence, and it's not easy, but it's necessary. And your role is, if you're going to be a business partner, then it's in the business's best interest for you to find a way to visit with the CEO about that bias. Help them to identify it. And I'm not saying that these are easy steps, but they're necessary. And by doing that, you show people, whether you're a male or a female, or if doesn't matter what color you are or what background, if you're in HR and you're a leader, you have a responsibility to also keep the CEO in check. It's part of your responsibility, and I think it might be on your job description, that's sure. But a tough conversation needs to happen with them, a private one-on-one, and discuss the issue, discuss the perception, help them see what's going on, and then I would discuss some action plans, maybe help them devise a goal or something that they can do to counteract that impression. And then I would do more training.
Yeah. For anyone in the audience who is interested more in how to have that conversation, we actually have an episode next month with Chris Corneen at MSI, and we're going to be talking about how HR can win corporate buy-in. So I encourage you, if you're interested more in how to lead up the chain, I think that'd be a great conversation for you to attend. Now, Teri, these have been great answers. I want to go ahead and move on to our next section here on career development opportunities for female leaders. So as we talked about a little bit earlier, there are some kind of glass ceilings that exist for women in terms of moving up in their careers. So with that, what type of historical challenges have existed for women to advance in their careers?
Stereotypically, again, I would say the perception that we couldn't handle it. If we're polite, we're not tough enough. If we're tough, we're dramatic, we're emotional. The perception is tough, and it's tough. It's really tough to find the balance there. So I think that you take that as far as perceptions, and then on top of that, for those women, whether they're single parents, whether they're parents at all, if they're caregivers or they have kids at home, you compound their responsibilities with having to balance the demands of work with the demands of home and still be able to do both. So that balancing is very tough.
Yeah. What are some things that companies are doing to invest in different types of developmental opportunity for these minority groups?
I think it's an exciting time because I actually think a lot of employers are stepping up to the plate and starting to see the necessity, the need to do this. The first one that comes to mind is what we call associate resource groups. A lot of people call them employee resource groups or whatever you do, ARGs, ERGs. I think that is one of the most popular ones right now where you can find commonality in a group and have education in that setting. Another one is maybe devise a task force for equity that includes leaders and employees in all different areas. Bring that diversity of thought together in a task force to identify action plans that you can do. I like our internal mentoring program here. It's been great. You have to mentor. If you sign up for the mentoring program, I'm a mentor here. And if you sign up for it, you mentor a person of a different ethnicity and in a different group, as far as working group or functional area. And that's been great. I think mentoring programs are amazing. I think other companies are doing educational assistance. There's additional training programs available. I think most employers have their own type of knowledge university on their computers, on their intranet that they offer to their employees as far as different trainings. That's been great. A lot of employers are now donating directly to HBCUs with scholarships, recruiting contracts with the colleges, and doing a lot of work with the historically Black colleges and universities. With all of that, though, one of the things that I need to say is employers who are going to promise it need to walk the talk. They need to follow it up with true actions that shows that it's not a flavor of the month. They need to show that this consistency is what they're serious about. And it's not about meeting numbers or quotas, but it's about providing encouragement and opportunity for everybody. And I think I really see employers doing a lot. I just hope it continues and gets better.
Yeah, Teri, I think that's exactly, what some companies experience is they walk the walk for the recruitment part, but they forget to walk the talk for the actual retention part. So I think it's important that organizations keep that in mind when, they're trying to attract talent and retain them as well. Now, I want to go back to a question from Miriam here. I did see your question. I was not ignoring it. It fits perfectly into this next question that I want to ask Teri. And Miriam is talking about an experience where, she feels that she continues to experience that if she's outspoken or assertive, that it's looked down upon, but a man does it and it's okay. And so her question, which leads into my next question here, is how can employers gain buy-in from male counterparts when it comes to promoting and advancing women? So thank you for the question, Miriam.
Yes, thank you. And it's a great question. I'm going to try to combine a couple of concepts here, and I know that we're getting short on time, but as far as gaining buy-in from male counterparts, I think it's important to point out examples of other women who have been very successful. I think that training on unconscious bias is very important, and making sure that that training actually sinks in and the person doesn't just pencil whip their training. One of the things that I have found throughout my career is one of the greatest things is having training on communication styles and personality differences. And what I mean by that is there are some people who are trying to climb the ladder and their CEO is a very type A or aggressive personality, very dominant, and they ask a question. Somebody trying to climb the ladder is going to identify every single step and detail of the answer, including how they derived at that answer, and it's a turnoff for somebody in a dominant personality. If you have training on communication styles, sometimes the approach of how you're communicating the information is an immediate communication turnoff that shuts that person down. So I would say that if you're experiencing that, maybe get some training on communication, make sure that you're presenting the information in a way that appeals to them. And I don't think anybody can have too much training. But did I answer that question? I know that we're running really short on time.
Yeah, no, thank you, Teri, for that. And with that, we are 5 minutes away from the end here. So Teri, I really only have one question left for you. And I want to know, what are your final thoughts? You know, what is the one thing that you think the audience should take away from today's discussion?
I don't know if I mentioned it or covered it very clearly, but I want everybody to know that they have value, regardless of their color, their gender, their background, their education. Not everybody has to have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree to be of value to a company. I think everybody that you work with and meet today, they also have value. So remember that. I think that one of the things we learned recently in a Sysco town hall is start with yourself and make sure that by focusing on yourself first, you're demonstrating the change and the acceptance that you want in the leaders. I think that we create, sometimes we create our own opportunities, and we have to take care of ourselves first. I guess most of all, I also want everybody to know that if they have something that they want to do or a dream they want to go for, to please go for it.
Thank you, Teri. That is wonderful. I'm very happy to end on this note. I appreciate your time today. You've shared a wonderful amount of wisdom and knowledge with us, so thank you for that. I also want to thank the audience for your attendance today. With that, we do have contact information. If you are interested, you can connect with Teri on LinkedIn, pick her brain, you know, network with her. And then we also have contact information for Verified First and our sponsors, namely and Jazz HR. With that, if you're interested in getting Sherman HRCI credit, stick around just a little longer and you'll figure out how. Thank you, everyone.
Well, that about wraps it up for today's discussion. I want to thank everyone for your attendance today, our guest Teri Hassell, Region VP of HR at Sysco, our host Brianna, and especially our sponsors, Jazz HR and Namely, for making this episode of HR at the Table possible. We'd love to hear what you thought about our webinar today, so make sure to leave us some feedback on our post-webinar survey. For our live attendees today, stick around just a little bit longer to fill out our post-webinar survey to redeem one SHRM and/or HRCI credit. For any on-demand listeners, check your email for instructions on how to redeem your credit. We'll be sending out the webinar on demand in case you want to use this for a reference or send it to a colleague. Also, stay tuned for more HR at the Table webinars and for blogs deep diving into today's topic. Next, we will be hosting the Global Head of HR at MSI International Inc. on Proving Value, How HR Wins Corporate Buy-in. We hope you can make it, and we will see you next time.
Awesome. That's all, folks. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week and good luck in all your efforts.